Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditation practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week, I think I'll continue drawing a bit on the results of our exercise as I record this after the initial session that happens live every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. through Mindful Prep, and reflect a little bit on what developed there and what comes from any act of attention and mindfulness when given the medium, a pen or pencil, piece of paper of creativity, and how complexity, density, novelty can emerge from that bit of time spent just engaging with a simple idea, shapes collected around each other, small archipelagos, gradually filling in the space between and allowing something new to emerge between them on that empty page. The exercise you're going to work through, you follow along, will generate something like this, perhaps. You can follow what I do or choose your own path through it, but what we're really working with are some organic, amorphous, lake-like shapes that form, in the end, little islands and give us an opportunity for all this flexible space in between. And now, after building up a lot of density through those moments of the exercise, I see an opportunity to go back through to kind of highlight or shade in those meandering canals that form between the little islands and see what that figure emerging from the background starts to look like. You might find this along the way in the exercise, or stick to just the curves as I did, build up visual density through meandering outlines, complex contours, and a little bit of layering of topography inside of there. For this drawing that we're about to engage with, this drawing exercise that we're about to engage with doesn't have an intended outcome. It may or may not look like this. And as you listen to the prompts, reflect on your breathing, notice your way of engaging with the page and the forms and figures that emerge there, feel free to take it in any direction that inspires you. Nothing in these exercises ever needs to look like what comes out of my imagination. It should open up the opportunity for your own imagination to express itself. But sometimes, with any creative act, having a place to get started, a little bit of visual influence or guidance can be helpful. So sit back, gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. Had a chance to do some hiking out in the woods around a nice lake and started there with the idea of the sketch, but let it evolve as the drawings do into just something about shapes. So what you may bring to mind as you enter into this is some idea of kind of archipelago, little islands of shape that work with each other, relate to each other, and then form spaces between on the page and see where the texture of that may lead. We'll start out with a little warm-up introduction, thinking about what it might look like to look out over a lake in the woods or something. You get kind of a funny little shape there, depending on where you're standing. And it has smooth edges, but lots of ins and outs and curves as the water has slowly found its equilibrium along the shoreline. And we can have several of these from different points of view with little bits of relationship to each other. So kind of nesting closely into an area or building off of a curve before taking its own journey around. That'd be something to explore in the larger exercise. Oh yes, have these irregular shapes that map around a perimeter and start to make a relationship between their inside space and that kind of flexing, moving space between them. As the exercise grows, we may work in degrees of scale, allowing for smaller, more direct shapes to fill in some of the spaces between. You may also find working into some of these shapes be interesting, providing a little contour, a little shaping, whatever may come to mind as we get farther along. But there's no wrong shape, any movement of that curve. Bringing your attention to it will be the important part of the exercise. As we enter into the paper, take a couple of moments. You can hold the pen to feel its weight or set it down just so that the hands be kind of even for a moment. Let them rest on the surface that you're engaging with, the table, the desk, the sketchbook, whatever it might be in front of you, just to become familiar with that distance, become familiar with the bend of the arm, become familiar with the position of the shoulders and the back, become familiar with the displacement that comes with the breath in and out, rising a little away from the surface and sinking a little back towards it. Maybe move the hands a bit around the edges or perimeter of the paper. Eyes can close or go soft. Just letting your spatial perception be present and aware of where you are, where you can reach, where it feels comfortable. And as you're ready, pick up your pen or pencil if it was down, or open your eyes and look to engage with that page. Imagining that undulating shape forming somewhere in that paper, taking a breath or two to stabilize. And when you're ready, on an exhalation, letting that shape begin to form. Moving at whatever speed feels comfortable there in the beginning. Some inlets, some atolls, some outlets. Maybe it's the outline of a lake, maybe it's the profile of a potato, some shape there that bends and flexes with the tension of the outer surface and captures a little bit of space inside, defines a little bit of space outside. As you look at that shape, looking along its edges, tracking with your eyes, and finding a place of engagement for the next interaction with these little archipelagos of outline or profile. Could be a deep dent, could be a strong edge or curve, maybe building out from a point or edge or end to the shape, wherever strikes your eye. We begin again with the breath in. And again, noticing now the comfortable speed. Are you moving consistently, quickly, slow? Is there smoothness or a little jerkiness or bump as the hand gets warmed up and engaged with the paper? A presence there with the way things are moving as we transition to guiding the way we move to enhance our connection and presence to the page. Now two forms beginning to wrap more into the space of the paper, directing more where new interactions can come into play. And finding the next moment, this time after the inhalation and the start and the exhalation, moving a bit slower, a bit more continuously, low acceleration, high consistency, and more time to think into how that pen or pencil is moving. It might change the way you interact with the paper a bit. That's okay. Just noticing comes up there in a bit slower motion, working your way around the perimeter, and then the shape comes back to itself and closes around some space. Taking a few breaths to reset, maybe letting your mind reflect on what it felt like to go a little slower, to move a little outside of the first intuition, natural comfort zone. And we'll make adjustment there, still trying to be smooth, but the speed can adapt a little to something that feels engageable, but still consistent as we start another piece, expanding out. And as you find that slightly slower than natural, but not so slow to be frustratingly tense or uncomfortable speed over a few of these items, a few of the interlocking, surrounding islands, and begin to use that evenness to bring your attention internally to the breath, or externally to the engagement of the pen with the paper, that texture, the angle, interaction. I think I'll begin with the breath and just let that become a grounding, relaxing force. The slow movement after an inhalation to start on an exhalation, and just watch the speed of the breath with the speed of the pen. Listening to the ins and outs as you move, feeling the rise and fall of your whole torso, and do a few islands at your own pace, just in that space of in and out, expanding and contracting, moving smooth and evenly, a little on the slowness so your mind can look inside to that breathing. Taking time between shapes if you want, just to breathe a few times, to normalize with that rhythm, to be present with a bit of the relaxation that comes from a fuller integration of the oxygen. And engage again in that act of drawing at an even pace. And even in our slow breaths, a relaxed tempo, evenness of pace, you may begin to notice the subtleties of variation, starting with a little bit of speed, slowing around tighter curves, moving slightly quicker on straightaways, and then perhaps slowing down to bring completion to that round edge. A subtler difference for our mind to occupy, the breath opening it, the hand experiencing it, the mind tracking it along, all slowly merging together as these collection of little islands wrap, nearly bump, join through space, and fill out the page. If your page is getting a little full, we can start to shift in scale and attention. Strong, calm foundation built in the interaction of these figures. Now we can let the hand move a little more free, but let the eye track a little more deeply in the spaces between, scanning across the drawing, left to right, right to left, letting the eye take it in, top to bottom, bottom to top. Give yourself a good, strong inhale. Find the space between that attracts your attention, and we'll engage there with smaller, maybe tighter figures that grab some of the features and then make some of their own. Pebbles, little atolls between, allowing that space to flow like little rivers or paths. And as the density develops, things may come to mind. Perhaps a park-like landscape, perhaps a more natural marsh territory, perhaps a more designed object, depending on your visual influences and backgrounds. But just following the contours of each shape's profile, seeing where it guides the pen, moving at a nice, even pace, at a speed that's comfortable, finding balance between the smaller, tighter spaces and the larger, sweeping moves of the first pass through. And get some rhythm going, the eye guiding to new places, tracking along those edges to provide variety, small, medium, things that fill in that space between the large objects that began the journey. A lot of space to work with. Each new shape, each new engagement becoming more playful, more open to the reception of the imagination, to the perhaps seeing of pattern. As we refine that space meandering between by defining that space of holding in and out, little islands forming a collection of relationships of positive and negative space, figure and ground. And if your page begins to fill, anytime you might start to layer into that, you see opportunity for tone or texture, the shading inside the islands, or marking in the paths between. Feel free to engage with that. Continue letting the little archipelagos form, making rivers, lakes, channels, pathways, anything in that densifying organic landscape. If you have other mediums, like a pencil if you're using pen, or colored pencil, something else around or nearby. You may play with that at any time as the drawing fills out and becomes something unique to your page. Let that imagination sink in. Let the eye guide the hand. Let the mind sit a little bit to the back as an observer to what begins to unfold on the page. Lightly seeing, if noticing a light, noting, my shapes all look long. My shapes all feel different and complex. The little ones I find more intriguing in the small spaces. The big ones feel out of place as they take up so much space. Things that processes in the patterns as complexity grows. Things we may have our own internal aesthetic positions on, whether we think about them or aware of them or not. We notice they speak to us. They're part of how we engage with anything in the world. And we can choose to work with them. Something of critical interest draws you in. We can choose to let them pass and stick with the technique, the light filling the different densities, the drawing opening that door for awareness, presence for a little while without much consequence at all. A few shapes flowing together, filling up some space, bringing complexity to what was an empty, undefined territory, letting the mind digest in that more visual sense, the output from the hand gently guided by the inputs from the imagination in the space that already exists on the paper. And I'll take a few minutes to draw in quiet space, just your breath, the scratching of the pen or the pencil, the ambient noises around in your space, and find a path to keep growing that complexity of the page through shape or any other interaction. As you draw, as that space of the page fills in with the density of figure, the complexity of curvatures, sometimes reciprocal working together, sometimes deviating, finding new borders or boundaries or edges. It becomes a quite complex space for the eye, the geometry intensifying, its layering or bounding or wrapping, the information becoming richer. But we may notice that as we work, we find some tiredness or fatigue set in the visual sense, it's possible as that complexity grows in intensity, the mind sorts more. We may find ease in that complexity, like looking through the branches of trees, so many unique pieces together as one swaying, moving thing. The mind loosens up, and for the last couple of minutes, trying to embrace that loosening up, no individual curve being very important, just seeing the whole thing move, letting the hand move with it, or when it feels time, letting it all come to a rest. We have a couple more minutes to draw and reflect on that intensity that can come from a few focused minutes of engaging with the technique. Reflect on where something begins with a little wobbling, undulating shape and then reaches out to become a new world, a story forming around each curve, the potential for imagining growing out of that simple relationship between parts and the paper as a whole. But as you feel ready, fill in your last few marks, shade the last couple of shapes for the exercise. You may continue on as long as you like, but to take that moment to say this one will be the last curve I draw for the time being, noticing the disengagement, the closing of the pen cap, the reorienting and setting down of the pencil or pen, coming back to where you started with those hands on the surface of engagement. Give yourselves a few deep breaths, eyes soft or closed, to just check in again where we began, the position of the back relative to that primary surface of action, the position of the shoulders to the back and the arms, the bend in the elbows, and the sensation of those hands resting on a tabletop where so much work just took place. With a final deep breath inhalation to the top, a little more held in for a second and then released. As your eyes open, come back, see the world on the paper, and return to your space around you. As I engage with this shading, the filling in, I grapple a bit with this feeling of completion, of wanting to get it somewhere, wanting to see what it's like when all that space between becomes highlighted through the tone of the colored pencil here. And it takes some work, some breath, some reminding that it's not about the end or the completion of it. That'll be interesting, maybe. Hopefully, something I desire to see and want to work towards. But the exercise is a practice, a discipline of engagement with this medium of expression, the pencil, the pen, the movement of the hand, the guiding of the eye and the nervous system. And I breathe and remind myself, hold that pencil with a bit of technique. Lift your hand off the page so you don't smudge too much of the graphite or pigment around. Try to follow the curvature and layer the shade to feel even and natural. You don't have to get it all done at once, but doing it well, in the sense of discipline of technique, with presence of mind, be a reward in the end. In that space of slowing a little bit, a space of quieting the desire of completion. Maybe we find a little quiet, that quiet and opening of the mind, a chance to reflect, to think on a practice, or anything else that might be floating around in there, letting the brain be occupied a little by this physical world, by the maintenance of discipline, so that the other portions of it can do their subconscious and their background processing and trickle forward now and again with an interesting thought. A thought maybe a distraction from a place of mindfulness, as thoughts often are, labeled, interesting. The thought may creep in, but our attention to discipline, our attention to that engagement with the paper through the way of working with the medium requires a little bit of mindfulness, requires that attention that can repress a thought, send it back to where it processes, let the mind cook a little bit longer while the body engages. A place of rest and work at the same time, coming through the exercise. So, whatever you find here in the exercises, try to keep in mind we're not aiming for an end or a purpose. We're working through a collection techniques, both for the mindfulness, the presence of action, and the expression through the drawing medium. As a practice, something done with intention to grow, expanding it better, something that may not always be fast or easy. It may take a little bit of patience, persistence, and resiliency. And hopefully you can find some of that in the exercise, while still opening up, having a bit of play, enjoying it as the journey, the movement, the practice becomes its own reward. And as I keep myself working here, following the curves, exercising the control of my hand extended to that pen or pencil, exercising the endurance of the arm to hold out that extension of the body. You can get lost for a little while in the work and relax into growth. If you enjoy the exercise, please let me know in the comments. Share them with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. Watch them fully through. listen, enjoy, and subscribe if you want more. Usually every Wednesday here on YouTube. Each exercise is its own unique entrance into a way that mindfulness may be practiced, a way we can find it. Some will resonate more than others. If you give them that time to practice, you might find a collection of techniques, concepts you can take with you throughout your day. Giving them just a couple of minutes can be a great way to let the mind organize some thoughts, let the body relax, create a little something on the paper, and prepare for engagement with that same level of patience, discipline, and resilience. So will I spend a bit more time here, working through all the spaces, exercising the muscles in my arm, my wrist, and my hand, exercising that hand-eye coordination and technique. I hope you too can find something to inspire, practice, and take with you for the rest of your day. Enjoy and draw well. See you next time. Thank you.